watched Winnie the Pooh last night.
Did you like it?
I loved it.
Really?
Oh my God, I loved it. I went to bed last night singing Winnie the Pooh, Winnie the Pooh. It's funny because it was speaking to a lot of what we've been talking about lately, which is like, what does it mean to work and quality of work and work-life boundaries.
I love that.
I do too. Did you notice I titled the last podcast
Boundaries?
Boundaries.
Yes.
Something boundaries.
Versus balance.
Versus balance.
Man!
That's not what I titled it, but that's what the conversation was about.
You titled it Time Management and Setting Boundaries, but yes, that's exactly what it was.
Thank you. Time management.
Well, see, I don't like the word balance because I don't know that it's balance.
That's exactly right.
Right? And that's why I like the word boundaries, or just, I always just sort of calling it, just sort of showing up. I mean, there's no such thing as work-life balance.
Agreed.
Right?
Yeah. And that's what we...
Just sort of showing up for your life, whatever you're doing.
Emily brought that up at the last...
Boundaries.
Last podcast. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so adopting that. Like, forget the word balance. I'm not using it ever again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because if you say balance, to me, anytime I said balance, it was just something in my mind that was like, well, there's like a little kind of give or take here. But if I say boundaries, then I automatically am like, whoa, boundaries. Not going to touch that.
So do not cross this line.
Well, and balance mean that one has to be less than or more than the other.
Oh, yeah.
Or they have to be equal.
Oh, I like that.
Oh.
Yeah.
So,
I like that, yes. It was totally reframing things for me in my head. Hello. You're listening to Everyday Mindfulness with Annamarie Ferniak, Evan Ryan, and Emily Parsons. Everyday Mindfulness is a light conversation about life, business, and personal growth. Thank you for joining us. We have a guest today, Cindy Biggs.
Hey.
Thank you for coming, Cindy.
Thanks for inviting me, Annamarie.
Cindy helps Mind Body Align with hiring. So her specialty is she is a CTI trained coach, like I am, and she specializes. I suppose I shouldn't speak for you, but in my mind, she specializes on strengths finders. So we had her work with us, my team at Mind Body Align, to identify our strengths, our individual strengths, and help us to determine the strengths of the people we needed to hire for different positions, and also how we each worked within our strengths to make our team better, faster, stronger, more efficient, all those fun things. So rather than me tell everything about you, Cindy, why don't you say a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so, probably, let's see, about 7 years ago now, I was in the position where I was making some decisions about my future and my career after a long 30-some-year career working in healthcare, and decided to focus in on my strengths to figure out what I would do. And coaching training was something that we had recognized even where I worked that we needed there internally. So that was something that I was thankful to be able to do as part of that chapter. But really just started thinking about throughout my career, what have I really loved doing? And what did my strengths suggest that I could really focus in on? And, I just know in using the model for a number of years before that it could make such a difference in the workplace to just be able to identify and figure out how you can use each person's strengths and even how we put together people and teams and departments and organizations and that kind of thing. So I started my own business, which is something I've dreamt doing probably since I graduated from college and started subscribing to Entrepreneur Woman magazine, right? So I started my own business, be able to focus in on those areas. And It's just been wonderful, and it's been delightful, and it's been open to so many new options and possibilities. So that's what I'm doing right now in my life, and it's all real good.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we're all entrepreneurs here.
Mm-hmm.
Woot woot.
Yeah, we are.
Yes, we are.
Yeah.
And actually, that's one of the things that brings us together, I think, is that we're always, for this particular podcast, it started out as being everyday mindfulness. Like, it was meant to be a conversation about mindfulness, but really what it has transitioned into is mindful entrepreneurship, because all three of us are entrepreneurs. And we often are talking about what we're learning through our businesses, through our continuing education, and how our limiting beliefs are impacting us in the business world. Mm-hmm. And also how our strengths are impacting us and our leadership. We're all leaders of our own companies and in our own arenas. So one of the things I noticed with StrengthsFinders was just how much it changed the dynamics of the team and how I led my team. What do you guys think? Have you used StrengthsFinders at all, Evan?
I've used it for personal reasons to understand myself better. I've not used it within the team because it's just not how I tried to. So I tried to in an organization that I ran, in a nonprofit that I ran a few years ago. It just wasn't how I was wired to think about job descriptions that way, to think about job placement that way, and around surrounding building a team. And so I moved away from it for a professional capacity, and I just kept it for a personal capacity, for a deeper understanding of myself.
And what have you noticed as far as your own understanding of yourself?
Well, it helps trying not to be somebody that I'm not. Because it's so easy to find the new hot person, the new hot thing that you want to emulate, or that you want to, that you think has qualities that you want to be like. And when you can appreciate those qualities and not necessarily need to adopt those qualities because it's just not natural to you, I think it's really valuable. One of the things that I think about a lot is some CEOs, some celebrities have very big personalities. They're always in front of people. They're always working on how can I meet like the next great person? How can I affect more people in a person-to-person capacity in a kind of an extroverted manner? And when I realized that I just don't have those strengths, that was okay with me. It didn't feel like I needed to force myself to be somebody who I'm not. And I think a lot of times a conversation surrounds, well, do I have the right qualities to get myself from where I am to my ideal state? And yes, the answer is yes, and I don't need to force myself into trying to develop a skill set that just isn't natural for me.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
It sort of confirms your ability to be authentic a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it helps you, not that these were probably a big surprise to you when you found out what your strengths were, but it just sort of gives confidence, I find, to so many people, and just I can be who I am and can showcase that now.
Yeah, it was kind of the dual feeling of everything else falls away immediately, and you kind of stop giving it the weight that you had given it before when you didn't know. And, in that feeling when somebody teaches you something and you go, oh, of course, like it immediately makes sense. That's kind of where it was. Like, yes, this immediately makes sense to me. I totally get it. There's no confusion. And the other things don't matter as much anymore because now I have this clarity.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How about you, Emily?
Well, until like 2 months ago, I was only a team of one, so I haven't yet. But as we're growing, I think it would be really interesting, just because we have so many different personalities between 3 people, and being like a female-only kind of company. I don't know, we're more emotional, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. So it would be nice just to kind of have some sort of clarity to everything.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. We're an all-female company as well at Mind Body Align. And understanding everybody's individual strengths and where their focus tends to be based on those strengths makes so much more clear, brings clarity.
Absolutely. I know something that like I've always known about myself is that I take everything like really personally, and something that I think is a strength because I will like take on the responsibility of whatever's happening, but it's also a really big weakness because, you know, someone could just be having a bad day and it has absolutely nothing to do with me. So I did start using the 4x4 or with a couple people on the team, because I was like, I know that this is something that I personally am trying to work on, is like removing my emotions from anything business. So I just want to make sure that I fully understand how you guys operate. So that's been good.
Yeah. So Cindy, just so that you know, the 4x4 is a strategic coach strategy for communicating with your team. And he separates it into these four quadrants. And each quadrant has four, I don't know what you call
Qualities.
them. Qualities. Thank you. So that's what she was referring to. It's
kind of a rules for engagement.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah.
The one thing, when we originally talked about the 4x4, the one thing that we didn't do was we didn't do the 4x4 on ourselves, which I think would have been really powerful, because when I did Strategic Coach a couple weeks ago, that's what they have you do. Before you do the 4x4 with your team, which basically you're communicating with them what your expectations are for them, you do it for yourself. And you're communicating with yourself, your expectations for yourself, and then you share that with your team first, which basically kind of softens it a little bit. It's like the first step to that communication. You're showing the team that, hey, you know, I'm going to give you this expectation sheet. Some of it may trigger a nerve with you of either your limiting beliefs or your own lack of self-confidence or whatever it is. But I want you to know that what I've done is I've done it for myself first. And I was honest with myself in the same exact way. And then you have them do the 4x4 for them, for themselves individually. And then you give them this 4x4. So I guess this is a little deep dive into something, but it's kind of pyramiding communication, and everything always starting internally, like making sure that you're being honest with yourself first.
Yeah, sounds good.
In CTI, we did agreements.
Right.
So we do agreements when I do my workshops. Do you do agreements with your workshops?
I do some kind of ground rules. Very, very little, though, actually. Yeah. Very little, but...
The thing I found that was very different, because I recently revisited agreements with my team, is agreements are kind of rules of engagement, but there's not so much space in there within the agreements for expectations. And so I think that the 4x4, what it does is it really lays out your expectations. The part that I felt was most powerful is, what could you do that would make you a hero to me? Like above and beyond the basic job description. Who could you be and what could you do to be a hero? And then also my own like funky nuances. What are the things that really aggravate me? It could just be when you talk to me while I'm walking out the door. You know, simple things like that. But what are those things that drive me crazy? And I felt, you know, the other two quadrants were interesting, but those two quadrants I found to be the most powerful.
No, I totally agree. Completely.
Yeah.
I think in establishing rules for engagement, a lot of times things that don't bother one person bother another. But like, it doesn't bother you enough that you're going to say something immediately. It's just like, this irks me a little bit. Then you get into this like straw that broke the camel's back situation 6 months later. Somebody explodes, or there's like this real conflict that could have been avoided by just being upfront, like, hey, I don't like it when you send an email that starts with an exclamation point. Like, it sounds too assertive.
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't care about that at all. Like, I'll just not do that anymore. But now we have this whole big conflict. There was all this stress. And instead of like going through that, you just tell somebody in a low risk environment, hey, I'm just meeting you. This is what I like and this is what I don't.
Yeah. And I think you also bring up the point, in communication, I think just in communication alone, we have to figure out expectations and sort of rules of engagement. Because I was just having a conversation with one of your team members about this, Annamarie, and there's just so many modes to communicate that you have to agree on how you're going to do that or how that works or what.
That was a part of our agreements.
Okay, yeah.
Because my team, we use Trello as a workflow.
Do you like it?
Yes. We love it.
We've been using Asana, but I've heard amazing things about Trello, and I'm really looking at
We love it.
switching.
And if you want to know how to make it work,
Yeah.
set up a meeting with Jen.
Okay.
She is like the queen of Trello. So the one thing about Trello that kind of made me crazy is that I would get a bazillion notifications
That's why I
in
don't
my
like
email. So you can turn that off.
Okay.
But we didn't realize that. And
Okay.
so what happened to me is I got to the point where I didn't pay any attention to them because I would get so many a day, 5
Yeah.
or 6 of them a day. I would just literally delete without looking at them. And unbeknownst to me, that was their form of communicating with me on many of the projects we were working on. So we had to, during our agreements, have a conversation about how we're going to communicate. I think it was you, Emily, in the last podcast that said when one of your vendors wants to contact you and they
Yeah.
send you an email, but then they send you a DM on Instagram to say,
Right.
did you see my email? It's like, what a waste of time.
Right.
So sometimes I'll get an email, but then
Yeah.
I'll get a text saying, make sure you take a look at my email. It's
And I'm like,
okay,
boundaries.
when we're talking about efficiency and work
Yeah.
production, let's talk about efficiency and how are we going to communicate and what are the expectations around communication.
Isn't it interesting too? Like, I just remember when I was at Carter's, we started off as like a team of 5, and then over the course of a year we went to just a team of 2, like myself and my manager, and we sat right next to each other. And so all of our communication was email or just literally talking to one another. And it was just interesting when I made that switch to what I'm doing now. People communicate with me on 6 different platforms. Not even being dramatic about that. 6 different platforms from one person. And sometimes I just want to be like, hey, I get it that we're small and it might seem like we're just best friends and everything that we're doing, but just send me an email. I don't want to hear from you 5 other ways. But it's going back to that whole thing we were talking about the other day, boundaries. And what can I kind of put in place? I started doing it with our most recent client. It's they don't have my phone number. I actually downloaded an app that will give me a second line that comes through my phone. And so I'll use that for initial phone calls or something like that, because I don't want you to feel like you have full access to me, because when I'm on vacation, you can talk to my team, don't talk to me. And there was just never that line before that. And I also would always feel really guilty or mean putting that into place because I take everything personally. So that's been a whole other kind of process. And also turning off email notifications at least 1 or 2 times a week on the weekends usually, or else I just answer it because I see it. Why not? I'm the worst. I've done this to myself.
Hi, I'm Annamarie Ferniak, a mindfulness teacher, entrepreneur, and urban revitalizer. In 2017, I launched Align Mindfulness, which is a free app available in your app store. I wanted subtle reminders to bring me into self-awareness. The app sends prompts 3 times a day, bringing attention to one aspect of your world. These reflections help build a well-rounded mindfulness muscle. It's intentionally simple and meant to supplement other apps as well as your meditation routine. Thank you so much for listening. So, Cindy, when it comes to strengths finders, do you see anything about how we communicate within that structure, that framework?
I mean, I think certainly, people, I think the executing strengths really would sort of be behind why you sort of can't feel like you can stop working. Okay?
Yeah.
Or that I've done enough and I don't have to continue to communicate or
Right.
respond to emails, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think the need for people to set boundaries around just stopping it or not doing it would be highest for probably people in executing strengths.
Mm.
That makes
So
sense.
executors,
Yeah.
it's about setting boundaries.
Yeah. I mean, just because they tend to do a lot of work and have a hard time feeling that they're ever done with work. And when you're an entrepreneur, I think it's even probably more so. I mean,
Yeah.
there's always things to do. It's not a
Right.
9-to-5 job.
Right.
So
The only one who's really
Yeah.
got any executing strengths is Emily.
It was a plot twist for all of us.
I think that's so funny that.
Evan.
Yes.
Yeah. you
Oh,
have
he does, doesn't
yeah,
he?
he has a restorative
I
strength,
missed
which
that
is
one.
a really,
Sorry.
really
I do
good
too.
problem solver, strength. Yeah. So,
But sometimes I wait until there's a problem before I actually take action.
solve it.
Yeah.
And sometimes you may create a problem.
Sometimes
in
I
order to
create
solve it.
exactly because it's going to be more fun that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd say, how many
Yeah.
problems did we create just because we were bored?
Yeah.
Like, not good.
Yeah. So that's a real typical. Well, for both of you, I mean, the restorative
Yeah.
strength is.
Yeah, Emily, it's your number one.
Sometimes I create a problem so that other people will restore it.
Sometimes you create a problem for attention.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I want to hang out.
You love problems.
I do love
You
problems.
love problems.
They're fun to
It's an
solve.
issue, so
They're so
Problems-
much fun to solve.
I don't.
They're your
I have a hard
friends.
time getting motivated if it's not that urgent.
So
I do things that are important and not urgent, but I have a hard time being really motivated to actually act unless we are facing a problem. And so, like, the way that I handle it is I build a team of people who can act on situations that are not problems, make sure that they're not problems as long as they possibly can, and then as soon as they become a problem, that's when I step in. But I don't want to deal with it until it's a problem. And if you bring it to my attention before it's a problem, I'm going to be bored.
Right. Because you love problems.
I love problems.
Yeah. So I think that definitely affects your communication, right?
I would say I feel like it's kind of been a cool thing that we both have a strength in there because we've solved some really interesting problems. It's also been like a negative, like where we need somebody to kind of step in and basically say, sit down and walk into different corners because y'all are just creating a tornado for no reason. It's kind of how I viewed it.
Yeah.
So if you were going to find somebody to balance that restorative, what would be a good balancer in a strength? Harmony?
That's funny. I was thinking about empathy or harmony, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that just really sort of the patience they have of just understanding where you're coming from and how this got started and not having to solve it, sort of that great listener that just sits there and can listen about it and not have to automatically move into fix-it mode.
Well, I think I definitely don't want to confuse it. There's not a level of being hectic along with wanting to solve problems.
Okay, yeah.
It's more that when everything is going well, everything is going well, and I'm not going to make it better. It's going well already.
Yeah.
And so if that changes, that's when I'm going to step in. But I think that there's real value in some people who are able to look at a situation that is going well and see future problems that are down the road. I don't see those problems until they happen. So going back to my rules for engagement, for everybody on my team, my top rule for engagement is you must see problems before they occur, because they need to be oriented around the fact that I will not. And I've given up trying to establish that quality.
Okay. Yeah.
So if you were going to have somebody who was really good at seeing potential problems, what would be that?
You'd almost go to, your all your futuristic strengths to some degree. Who else? To me, there's a piece of looking at, examining, trying to figure out what's going to happen,
Mm-hmm.
what the risk is, what's,
That futuristic.
interesting, yeah. Or strategic, or...
So all three of us are futuristic thinkers.
So when I think about that, where mine I guess I've learned through us working together is if something comes up, I've now learned to be like, but what could go bad down the road, or like what kind of roadblock could we run into? But that's also like a really hard mindset for me because I see everything like so positive. Like even when I have conversations, I'm like, what do you mean that's gonna go bad? Like this is a gold mine. So I see it more as like this is something that down the road's gonna like blow up in a great way and gonna help. So I think if maybe there was somebody who was futuristic, but like, I don't want to say not positive, but
well, yeah, your positivity.
Maybe like strategic.
Yeah, strategic. I was even thinking more so, but.
Or is there one that signifies like a realism, like somebody who is really good at assessing the truth in a situation? Realistic.
The way that I view that realism is actually not on StrengthsFinder because I am futuristic, number one strength, and positivity is not in my top 5 strengths.
Yeah.
I view that realism as experience. And so I always work to partner up with people who have experience doing whatever I've done before, or in the same realm of what we're doing, even if the actual problem that we're solving is a new problem. That way they can look down the road and say, here are where the roadblocks are going to come up, and I know this because it's happened before.
Absolutely.
Well, so there's a person with context that is sort of that piece of things that happened before and sort of has this historic kind of, understanding of things, or brings that along with them a little bit more. So,
Context.
Yeah, context, which is another strategic thinking strength.
Well, yeah, because we were just having a conversation a couple of weeks ago, and we both said, like, if you break down everything that we've kind of done over the last year or even 6 months, like, it's been a lot. But we only know what we know, and we've only had the experience that we have. And so you can't change that until you've gone through 10 years of this or something like that. So, yeah, kind of going off of that.
Is that all in line with Evan's decision to hire people who have more experience? Yeah. So you want to say a little bit more about that, Evan?
Yeah, so my company has 4 or 5 full-time.
5
full-time team members, and all of them are under the age of 37. It's very easy for me to hire young people who are going to be a little bit more easily bought into a vision, who have strong skill sets at executing, but don't have experience. The problem is their executing skill sets get them out over their skis a little bit, and then we get burned on the back end somewhere. And so my focus lately has been on bringing a little bit more experience into the company. That way we can have people coaching us. And so in terms of my giving up almost all control over what's happening on a day-to-day basis, I do want to give it to somebody I consider them a bit more of an integrator, somebody who's a little bit more detail-oriented, who's a little bit more day-to-day oriented, and who has seen where things can go wrong and knows quite a bit more of what we don't know. And so that's been a much more difficult sales process. I call it a sales process because it's a startup. Hiring somebody with experience is a sales process. That's been way more challenging lately. That being said, the rewards are much greater because they make our lives so much easier. I don't have to solve as many problems, and I can focus I can take this restorative strength, combine it with the futuristic strength to say what problems are there in the world that need to be solved. So instead of saying what problems are there in my day-to-day or in my company that need to be solved, it's what problems in the world need to be solved, and how can we use our existing products or future products to solve those problems.
No, I like that. I mean, to me, that's sort of why we always try to hire a diverse group of people versus a group of people that are more similar, because of just the perspective and skills and differences that they bring to the table, right?
And that's what StrengthsFinders helped me do within my organization. It really helped me to not look at hiring a person who was like me.
Right.
And forced me out of that comfort zone into hiring people who were very different from myself, which can be a challenge.
It's very challenging, I feel like. That's what I mean. We kind of had this conversation before, and I once I get to a certain point, like, details mean nothing to me, and it's just my mind is on to the next thing. And so bringing on people who are so detail oriented that it honestly makes me uncomfortable, because I'm already 15 steps ahead of like something you're still doing, and it's been like a lot of personal growth on my end, because I'm like, I understand that like what you're doing is so valuable. I just need to like mentally rein it back a little bit, because you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. I just like have already decided that we're going to have 10 more companies down the road. Like, I don't know. Like, there's just nothing there. So
I'm
it's
exactly
difficult.
the same way.
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah, for me, it's like when we have meetings which are revisiting other things that still need to be hashed out, there still need to be details. I'm on the next thing. For me, mentally, it's like checking, check.
Yeah.
Let's get through all this stuff so I can get to the fun stuff. You know?
It used to make me like super anxious, honestly. I used to just get like it was so uncomfortable that I would then have to, before I can even have a conversation or go into a meeting with people that are more detail oriented, I have to actually like almost meditate myself so I can then be very much just present and not thinking about 500 other things.
That's so funny. I was shaking my head violently because I was thinking mindfulness. That's where the mindfulness practice is so supportive for me, because I can hear myself in my head saying, oh my God, not this conversation again, you know? And I have to then breathe and recognize that for this other person that I'm speaking with, this is an important conversation.
Absolutely.
Even though I feel like we've been there, we've done that, you know?
Oh, yeah.
So I have to breathe and be present, and then listen to maybe what's different about the conversation or what's actually happening. Where's the concern? What's the question?
Yeah. No, I mean, once we started working together and I realized like what mindfulness truly was, it helped me a lot, because when I would get super, like, I just remember my mind and everything would be going like a million miles per hour, that I would get so anxious and nothing was happening. And so then it allowed me to actually sit there and ask myself, like, what are you worked up about right now? Like, what are you thinking about? And it was always that I was just like, it was 2018 and I was in 2020 in my mind. Like, that's just all that
I was already, this was done, you know?
Right. Yeah. So it is really helpful for that.
Yeah.
Well, the piece that might be even, you know, really helpful around that is the idea of, back to this whole piece about setting boundaries. You know, we're setting, you know, set time frames for people, because certainly people who are detail oriented, who are usually really strong executors, will meet deadlines. So, you know, set some boundaries around how much longer we're going to talk about this.
How many more times we're
How
going to
many
talk
more
about
times we're going to talk about this, when we're going to complete this, when we're going to finish this up. You know, I
Right.
mean, establish some clarity around that will help you and them to even know that they need to finish it up and get it done, and it's over.
And that's really interesting, because I've been involved in Strategic Coach with Dan Sullivan, which Evan is involved as well. And one of the things that's very important about his strategy is, which we talked about at the last podcast, is this who, not how. And the philosophy is that as the visionary, as the leader, you don't have to figure out how these things are going to be accomplished. You don't even have to work through the process of accomplishing. All you have to do is put the right people in place. So one of the things that's going to be happening for me and my team as we move through this process is me doing less of the yes, 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 and them taking more responsibility for decision making. So I do think that's important, because for me, that's the revisiting thing. Those are the revisiting things that happen all the time, is they're coming back to me with questions about these things that really, they have the strengths, they have the knowledge, they have the ability to make the decisions without my kind of approval.
They may just need the permission to do that.
Right. So that's part of it.
Yeah.
Is letting go. I mean, what I'm saying is it's me.
Yes.
Like, I need to let go of the decision making.
And give them, and part of that is giving them the permission to do that, right? That you don't need to have that degree of control.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah. It does come with time.
Yeah.
Sure. And trust.
Trust, absolutely. And having more, as our company gets a little bit older, we've only been around now for like 2 years. As our company gets a little older, we have a little bit more experience about how these things are supposed to look.
Mm-hmm.
And then I can focus on the things that we don't know how things are supposed to look, right? I can focus on the other stuff, which is more fun for me.
Exactly.
So I have another question, and this may be something that you don't know about or do know about, Cindy, and that is Kolbe. The Kolbe, I always want to call it a test. And every time I say Kolbe test, I'm told it's not a test, it's an assessment.
Yes.
So with Strategic Coach, they use the Kolbe assessment. Evan, do you know much about that?
Yes, I do, because I've taken it.
Okay, cool.
So essentially what it is how do you personally work? And so it is actually rules for engagement for other people to understand you. And so you use it for yourself and you're like, oh, that's neat. Of course I would work like this as long as you answer the questions
Honestly,
authentically.
yeah.
And everybody else probably already knows all of this, but now you're all on the same page with the common language. And so it's broken up into four categories, and I can actually pull mine up.
I'm actually going to be taking the test tomorrow.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asking my strategic coach about it, and I told her I had done the Strengths Finders, and she said, well, Strengths Finders and Kolbe actually work very well hand in hand. Strengths Finders tells you one aspect, and Kolbe tells you another aspect of your personality.
Yes. So this is going to be like in my day-to-day, they break it up into 4 sections. The first is Fact Finder. On a Fact Finder, somebody who's kind of low on a Fact Finder on a scale of 0 to 10 or 1 to 10 is somebody who does not want all the facts. Then there's somebody in the middle, 4 to 6, who kind of wants the facts and kind of wants to experiment. And then there's the person who's long on fact finding, who's just that, long on fact finding. There's a second one, which is about follow through. So basically, are you a perfectionist? Are you kind of in the middle? Or are you going to get started? Are you going to get started and you're probably not going to be the perfectionist there? The third is, how do you innovate? So some people innovate very slowly, very methodically, and some people innovate very quickly. They want to jump in. They are willing to build the airplane after they've jumped off the cliff, right? And like they just don't know how it's going to go. They're going to figure it out along the way. And fourth, how do you implement? So for me, and then it's essentially, well, how do I work in a day-to-day? How am I going to react to certain situations? For me, and I'm sure this is a surprise to none of you, I'm very low in fact-finding. I don't care about research. I know other people care about research, and I would like them to care about research. I don't care about research. I have very low follow-through. So this is where my restorative strength actually comes in quite a bit. I adapt quite well. But I'm going to adapt to a certain level, and that's going to be it. I'm a very high quick start. So I'm one of those people who we are going to figure out how this is going to go along the way. I don't really know how this is going to be, and we're just going to try it and see what happens. It could blow up in our faces. And then I'm restorative in my implementing quadrant. I'm very restorative, which matches Strengths Finder. And so really what's interesting about it is if you combine the two things, you combine Kolbe and you combine strengths. I'm a strategic thinker, but I'm not an overthinker. And so I'm a low fact finder. I am somebody who adapts, and I'm somebody who is willing to jump right into something. But I'm not somebody who's willing to research. Looking at my strengths, I'm futuristic. I like to ideate. Input and intellection are 4 of my 5 top strengths. Of course it would be that way. Right? Somebody who likes to do a lot of research, somebody who's long on follow-through is going to be somebody who's really placed well in the executing quadrant.
Yeah, I seem to remember that she'd said something about the Kolbe is more about your doing.
Yes.
Like how you get things done.
Yes. How do I act in a day-to-day?
Yeah, interesting.
So how do you feel like knowing these two things helps you in your day-to-day?
I thought once I looked at my Colby report, I realized exactly who I was going to hire through the rest of the company. Like for as long as I like exist inside of this business, I know who I'm going to hire, and it's somebody who's not a high quick start. And it's not somebody who's low on follow through. Because there's going to be one person who's allowed to be a high quick start, and that's going to be me. If other people are going to be a high quick start, then I am also going to be a high quick start, and we're going to go off the rails really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so, like, in terms of what is my job actually, my job is strategy, my job is to build a great team, and my job is to make sure that we have cash coming in the door. And we can't have strategy getting derailed by the next cool, shiny object. So from here on out, everybody else is going to be a medium to low quick start. Now, on top of that, I am not going to have my closest of close reports be extremely low quick starts, kind of like the opposite on all of these different quadrants, because then we're going to clash too much.
Right.
Like there's a point where diversity becomes counterproductive.
Right.
And so it's going to be a little bit of an easing process.
Mm-hmm.
But inside of that easing process, I can do my job, which is focus on strategy, building a great team, and make sure that cash is coming in the door. And my entire team can start to set deadlines. They can start to set expectations for me. I can say, we're going to do this cool thing. And they're going to say, we're going to have to slow it down a second because we need to know what research do we not know, right? What facts do we not know? What are the things that we need to perfect? Otherwise, in 6 months, we're going to get burned on it. And so I'm hiring for more experience right now. At the same time, it's because of those qualities.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a question. When I was beginning to fill out my team, I hired Cindy to help me hire the people who were different than myself, that had the different strengths, had the strengths I needed in order to operate the business. How do you hire? Do you just look at tests? I mean, how are you hiring so that you're filling out strengths, you're filling out the Colby assessment in diversity in your team, yet you're also you're developing a certain culture?
Yes. So I have not gotten to the point yet where I'm having every candidate go through, or every serious candidate go through the Colby test. I'll get there. I'm asking questions that guide to, I ask really tough questions in the first phone call. And if I don't really like the answers, there isn't a second phone call. And so I have a lot of phone interviews.
Yeah.
My favorite question to ask is, tell me about a time where you and your boss disagreed and you were right. And so depending on how that's going to go, like we're going to see how much do you care about following through on it. We're going to see what's your fact finding through it. We're going to see how do you integrate with my culture. Because there are going to be times where I and my team disagree. My team is right, and they have to be willing to stand up for what they believe in. And like, I'm not the easiest person to go head to head with. And so if you're not somebody who's going to fit that kind of, you have to be really independent inside of this organization culture that I'm building, that question is going to weed you out immediately. And it weeds out probably 98% of my candidates. And so that's kind of where I sit with it right now. I do ask about perfectionism. Are you a perfectionist? I do ask things that get to just kind of how do you think as a person, speaking to like culture. What's something that you believe to be fundamentally true that most people disagree with you on? And from there, it's a gut feel. Do I like you or do I not? And if I don't absolutely like you, I do not hire you.
Hi, I'm Annamarie Ferniak, a mindfulness teacher, entrepreneur, and urban revitalizer. In 2019, I published my first meditation with Insight Timer. To listen to these meditations, please download the Insight Timer app from your app store and search Annamarie Ferniak. Thank you so much for listening. One of the things we talked about in the last podcast was making sure that even if you are surrounded with diversity or if you go into communities that are challenging, that at least there be some shared values. Do you want to speak to values maybe, Emily?
Yeah. Something that we talked about was how I have been surrounding myself with people who are different than how I operate, but we have the same kind of like values and views, in the sense of like we're all motivated and we're all trying to do something and build something, but that doesn't mean that we like operate the same in the same way, or that we see like every single detail the exact same. If anything, like for instance, one of the people who joined our team, she is really passionate about the company and she really like can see it going super like far and like has all these great ideas for it. So like we're aligned there, but the way that we work day in and day out could not be more opposite. And so I kind of said that who you're surrounding yourself with is like ultimately where you're going to be going. And I think that it's great to be able to look back on the things that you've gone through and like help certain people with where they are in their life, but that doesn't mean that you need to surround yourself with negative people or surround yourself with people that just aren't meeting that same like values that you have, because you're not going to win out in that situation. Like you're going to go to that low level. And so that was a little bit kind of what we were talking about.
Well, and I think in your example, you can't work in a situation where people are negative.
Right.
So to be able to screen that or see that really clearly up front is going to be real important for you.
Yeah, I can't operate in it at all. My first like team when I was on Carter, when I was at Carter's, 2 of the people on there were like just negative. It's just how their personalities were. And they ended up doing like an entire restructure anyways, and I thought it was funny they made us all take like personality tests and all of this before they restructured us, and they put me like as far as I could be put from the that team, and everyone that I was with was just like they were just positive people, and like we did great and we thrived. And I just don't, there's nothing inside of me that can I can't stand it. Like I can't even really be in a meeting with people that are like that.
No, you can't.
No.
I mean, that's just evident because it's so high. Stress,
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes there's an advantage at times to work with people that are really a lot like you. As far as getting work done, getting quickly, someone gets how I'm thinking. I don't know. I like
being the type of people that I like working with and that I've seen it be like a really productive situation are like not like super human kind of like motivation level by any means, but they just have this whole nother level of like motivation and drive to them that you leave the meeting or the conversation and you feel like you could take on the entire world. Like that's where I am the best. If I leave a conversation and the entire time you were just like, yeah, I mean, I get it, but, like, I'm going to leave that and be like, listen, something isn't matching up here. And either, like, I'm 100% off base and I need you to tell me, or, like, you're too scared of that next step. And so, but then that's also hard, like, because you need people around you that can keep a realistic kind of view of everything. So... But I also am at the point, like I was having a conversation with somebody a couple months back and I was like, this is what we're going to do. It's going to be great. And I was just so on fire about it. And she was like, yeah, maybe. And I don't know if I'm just at this point now where I just kept, like I left the conversation and I was like, oh, I'm just going to do it. Like, we're just going to make this happen. And she actually came back to me a month later and was like, I'm so sorry that like I was being so negative about all of that. It was just like where I was at, but I think you're right, and I think this would be a really cool opportunity. Like, let's try and do it. So I don't know. I guess I've become immune to certain aspects now. Good or bad, who knows?
And I think the earlier point of just sometimes trusting your gut,
I
mean, is really big. Really big.
Yeah, absolutely.
Getting a sense of, red flag, getting a sense of that this isn't going to work out. And listening to it.
And sometimes I'll ask clarifying questions.
Yes.
Like if I'm sensing that somebody is really resistant, I'll say, so what is happening that you're feeling resistance to what I'm saying or what I'm proposing. And then oftentimes they will bring up aspects of whatever my proposal that really need to be analyzed. So that's the importance, I think, of having people who balance.
Yeah.
Not balance. We're not using that word anymore. Having people that complement you
Yeah.
in different ways.
Absolutely. And it's like, I want you to have that very realistic view on everything, but I just like want you to do it in a positive way. You know, like I want us to leave and all feel like,
Icky.
yeah.
I do think that there are people who can bring you back down to earth but not leave you feeling defeated.
Yes.
They're really hard to find, though.
They so hard.
They're very delicate with their words and with their body language. And like I do find that when I find those people, I hold on for dear life because like they're just so few and far between. A lot of people I think a lot of people who say that they're realists or like they're just looking at the real world are actually just super negative and grumpy, and they're projecting themselves on you.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Like it's a reflection of themselves.
Absolutely.
And so when we're going to take this all the way back to strengths. When I find people who have that certain level of empathy, not empathy being like, I'm going to help you see yourself, but empathy being, I understand where you're coming from and I'm going to enable you. I'm just going to shift your direction by 1 degree. Like those are the type of people that like I really work hard to bring onto the team and keep them, even if I do not have a job description for them.
Yeah, because
I've made that hire twice.
Yeah, they're so difficult to find.
Yeah.
And empathy really is about listening and asking questions. It's not so much about expressing an opinion. Or even like those comfort things that we tend to do. You know, we tend to appease people by saying comforting words. That's not true empathy. Empathy really is just listening and asking clarifying questions.
Yeah. It's like, when you were saying all of that, it's kind of like I don't want people around me in the sense of like you're so positive and you're going to agree with everything that like we're just boosting each other up and we walk away being like, what the heck is going on here? It's like I want you to just have a positive outlook on life, because I believe that if that's the mindset you're in, like that's where the like great stuff is going to happen for you, like personally and for our business. Like negative breeds negative. So I read this article, or it was something, and they were like, the moment you have one person on your team that's negative, your entire team goes downhill, because it's easier to bring somebody down than it is to like pull people up. And I'm not willing to like even get like anywhere close to that, because I've seen how it has affected even big like teams that I've been on in big companies, and it's a dangerous spiral.
Yeah, going off that, I had to fire the most talented person I'd ever hired because of it.
Yeah. Well, and the problem is people just don't fire them, or they let them stay, and it's devastating. I mean, so when they finally, when someone can do that, it changes a whole team immediately. I mean, as you know, it changes things immediately when they're gone. But so often we have people that just aren't willing, can't, or avoid those conversations and just don't do anything about it.
And that's right, what you said, Emily, about who you surround yourself with is where you're going to be going. If you have somebody on your team, it's like a rotten apple.
Yeah.
That rotten apple will spoil the whole bushel.
And the thing is, it's like you're going through something personally that I am really sorry that you're going through that, and I hate that like there's something going on that's making you feel this way. But I also have to make sure that we all have to make sure that that's not going to trickle over into where we're making our livelihood, because I can't fix your attitude, and I can't fix like your personal situation. That's only something that you can. And if you're not willing, or you're not in a spot that you're able to right now, I am like not in a spot to be able to take on that kind of responsibility almost, which is also really hard, being able to like being in that situation.
there's a sign that you'll see in certain yoga studios that say, take responsibility for the energy you bring into the space.
Ooh, yeah.
And I love that.
Yeah.
It really does. It's like, check it at the door.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Whatever bad that's happening to you in your world, leave it out there.
Mm-hmm.
When you shut the door, bring something else.
Well, that's
More
like,
positive energy. in
yeah,
you.
absolutely. I mean, we are all constantly affecting and influencing every single person that we come in contact with, and it's our job to view that responsibility and make it a positive one, regardless of the situation, even if we're just going to go have coffee or if I'm having a 5-minute phone call.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just recognizing it's a choice.
Absolutely.
It's a choice, and people don't get that.
It really is a
that
choice.
you can choose how you're going to be at any interaction in your day.
Mm-hmm.
And this is not a plug for our Sedona retreat because we've already, our Sedona retreat is full.
Oh, awesome.
But that's what we're going to be talking about in Sedona at our retreat is just this energy,
Yeah.
how we are all made up of energy, and how you can choose
Mm-hmm.
what you put out into the world.
Absolutely.
So I'm really excited about that. And Cindy and I
Yeah.
are co-facilitating, so
Oh,
that'll be a
fun.
lot
Yeah,
of fun. In
lots of fun.
Sedona, Arizona.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about that. And people don't realize. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've talked to who said, I have no control. I have no control over how I feel.
Well, but here's the thing too, is I was at a point in my life where I felt like I had no control over what I was feeling, but that's because I was surrounding myself with very unstable individuals who probably didn't have any control over what they were doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was like this constant kind of chaos. And it took me finally sitting down one day and being like, hold up, I can control this. I just have to put on my big girl pants and make the hard decisions and go forward with my life if I want to live a better life. And it's getting to that point where it's like, unfortunately, sometimes you kind of have to hit rock bottom to then be like, there's something better out there. I hope that doesn't happen to you, but
Yeah, really.
yeah,
Plugging into something better
absolutely.
to constantly increase and
Mm-hmm.
improve.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And just being open to something better.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Oh, yeah. Affirmations.
Yes.
Personal development.
First
life-changing.
is realizing who you're being.
Oh, yeah. Actually sitting down and looking at the life that you're living. I was just having a conversation with my friend over the weekend, and we were talking about a mutual friend, and we were just saying, there's so much chaos going on that sometimes it's hard to say to somebody that you care about, there's one common factor here, and we want you to live the best life that you can, but you gotta want that too. And you can't ever make somebody see that, so that's also kind of difficult too.
Mm-mm.
But yeah, no, fully.
They say when the student is ready.
Hmm.
It's like you can tell somebody over and over and over again the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
and they're just not ready to hear it.
Absolutely.
They don't even hear the words the way you're speaking them. But as soon as they're ready, all of a sudden they hear it, and then they're likely to say, why didn't you tell me this before? Well, I did, but you weren't hearing
Yeah.
my words.
I was listening to a podcast on the way here, and the guest speaker that they had on it, that's exactly what she said. She's actually, I don't watch Game of Thrones, but I guess she's one of the main people on there, and she's been on it since she was 12 years old or something. And
Wow.
she said that basically until a year and a half ago, her entire life, she's everything for me professionally was obviously going amazing. I was I'm a star on Game of Thrones, but personally my entire life was in shambles, to the point where she was out loud saying to herself I hate myself, kind of a thing. And it was just interesting. She was I've had friends come up to me after hearing me finally talk about my story, and they would say, why didn't you tell me this was going on? I could have helped you. And she's you can't help somebody when they're in that situation. She's I had to help myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so true.
Oh, it is so true.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And you never see it until you're already a year out of it, looking back, kind of a thing.
So we're about out of time. So Cindy, do you want to share with us all of the ways that somebody can contact you?
So we're talking about communication, right?
Yes.
Certainly, my website is Seebig, SEEBIGG, and I think you can make a connection through there.
Is that .com?
.com, yeah. So that might be the easiest, and certainly, probably just for me, my email address, which is at Gmail, Cindy J. Biggs.
Cindy
good way to
J.
make a
Biggs
connection,
at
yeah.
cbig.com.
At Gmail.
At gmail.com.
Yeah, at
Okay.
Gmail, yeah.
And say a little bit
Connection.
about what you do out in the world as a career.
Yeah, I do lots of leadership executive coaching with people, companies, and individuals, and I'm a trainer. Do a lot of training around leadership and supervisory kind of topics, but I'm really interested in strength-based leadership and doing some team training this afternoon. Really getting interested in emotional intelligence work as well, which is right along the line of the mindfulness work too, I think. So, we'll help with some human resources issues, hiring, as I've done for you, Annamarie, as you've mentioned. So yeah, that's, but open to new options and possibilities. Do some retreats for women is another thing I do, but that's really under the leadership, work as well. So
Cool.
yeah.
Thank you so much for
Thanks for
joining
having
us.
me,
I
yeah.
hope this was worthwhile for you.
Certainly is. Yes, thank you.
And Emily, any last
Yes.
words?
Oh man, go out into the world and just live your best life. Be positive.
Be positive.
Because girlfriend, you're the only one who can control that. And if you want to agree, I don't know. I'm just rambling now. Just cut me off. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere positive. You
All
just
right.
always catch me off guard there.
It's my knack. I have a knack.
know.
And Evan Thomas,
Have a great day.
thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, audience, for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks again for joining us today. If you'd like to connect with us on social media, you can find Annamarie at Mindfully Annamarie. You can find myself at Emily VDW, and you can find Evan at _Evan Ryan. We'll talk to you next week.
Thank you for listening to Everyday Mindfulness. Have a great day.